The Discontented Ghost, Chapter 6. Those abominable Americans had spoiled my evening, and were threatening to spoil my record. I had underestimated them badly. I saw now that I would have to go all out if I expected to rid Canterville Chase of their presence. The situation was serious. Naturally, I would never have countenanced the sale of the house to the Otises had I not been confident I could frighten them away in short order. Now I felt like a luckless exterminator who, after doing his best in an infested house, discovers that not only are the insect pests still in possession of the premises, but that his own clothes are full of fleas. Certain I would be the chief topic of discussion at the breakfast table the next morning, I thinned myself out thoroughly and hurried to eavesdrop. Nothing of what was said gave me any pleasure. Not a word was spoken by Mr. Otis, indicating the slightest aesthetic appreciation for costuming, lighting, sound effects, or performance. Instead, he contented himself with various patronizing remarks and some censure, far too slight, of the twins. I have no wish, he twanged, to do the ghost any personal injury, and I must say that considering the length of time he has been in the house, I don't think it is all polite to throw pillows at him. A very just remark, at which I am sorry to say the twins burst into shouts of laughter. Upon the other hand, he continued, if he really declines to use the Rising Sun lubricator, we shall have to take his chains from him. It will be quite impossible to sleep, with such noise going on outside the bedrooms. A threat. A ruddy threat. The little rooster sat there blandly talking about taking my chains away from me, as though I were part of the household staff. It was all I could do to not firm up, seize the marmalade pot, and empty it on his shiny bald head. Rather than spend another moment in his provoking presence, I whirled away into the library to recover my composure. Here I found something more pleasant to rest my eyes upon. Moving about competently with cloth and duster, the parlour-maid Sheila was tidying up the room. Settling myself in my accustomed place, I observed with pleasure the lissome grace of her slender form, the sensuous curves of her slim hips, the provocative rise and fall of her pert bosom. I had thought they no longer made serving wenches the way they used to, but young Sheila had changed my mind. She looked to be about 18, and I was just wishing I were 300 years younger myself, when who should come sidling into the library trying to look as if he had just happened along but young Washington Otis. His pathetic attempt to act nonchalant was marred by the manner in which he changed color, gulped, and ran a finger around his collar as though it was strangling him. "Oh, good morning, Sheila," he croaked. She gave him a brief glance and dropped him a quick curtsy and barely interrupted her domestic activities. "Good morning, sir." With awkward strides he moved nearer, his approach observed out of the corner of one glinting brown eye as Sheila continued her dusting. Licking his lips, he attempted a devil-may-care chuckle. "You're a bonny lass, Sheila." What an awful line. Now I saw it all. The poor simp had been boning up on novels of English country life in the good old days, novels in which young lord of the manor was constantly pursuing parlour-maids whenever they took his fancy, and Wash had decided to have a go at it. Sighing, Sheila turned and faced him. "Am I, sir?" she asked in a cool voice, which should have warned him off, except that Wash was too committed to stop himself now. "You are indeed. Give us a kiss, eh?" he stammered, and made a fumbling grab for her. The smack that sent him reeling back left one of his cheeks even redder than the other, which was quite an accomplishment. "I am a maid, sir, and I intend to remain one," said Sheila. And she left him, watching her exit with his hand on his flaming cheek. Now, if such a thing had taken place in those novels he had been reading, the offending parlour-maid would have left the young lord gnashing his teeth and vowing a terrible vengeance on her. But here Wash missed his way. Instead, his punch-drunk gaze followed her with absolute adoration. An instant later, Miss Virginia came through the doorway, glancing back in the direction Sheila had gone. Finding her brother present, she gave him a quick appraisal that was shrewder beyond her years. "Wash, what happened to your face?" "What? Oh, I stumbled against the—" "You did not. Sheila smacked it." Wash glared helplessly at his sister, but then his glare dissolved into agony. "Well, what if she did? She's the purest, loveliest creature I've ever seen, and I'm not fit to touch the hem of her garment," he moaned with the extravagance of his tender years. His sister pounced. "You're in love with her." "I adore her." "Oh, good. I'm glad, because I did so need a hold on you. I won't say a word about it, Wash, but now you must help me." Poor Wash was already biting his tongue, but it was too late. He eyed her warily. "What are you talking about?" "Well, Cecil can't very well invite himself here, can he? His nasty old guardians wouldn't let him anyway, and I can't ask Mama to ask him, because she'd ask a lot of questions about why I wanted to ask him and wouldn't ask him. But you could ask her to ask him, and she'd ask him." Wash picked his way through all these askings and then stared at her. "Cecil? You mean that little Duke of Cheshire?" "He's not little. He's almost as tall as you are." "But, why, he's barely 18. "He is 18, going on 19. I looked him up in Burke's Peerage." "Don't tell me you've fallen for him." "Certainly not," said Virginia with head-tossing dignity. I just wanted to see him again. If you tell Mama you thought he was nice and you'd like to know him better, she'd invite him down in a minute." "For pity's sake, Ginny, I hardly know the fellow. I only saw him once, when you had that silly race with old Lord Bilton up in London, and I didn't speak more than 6 words to him then." "That doesn't matter. Besides, the little ass proposed to you." "How dare you call him names?" "Well, he did. But it was only in high spirits. Wash, you're being impossible. If you'd rather I told Mama—" "You be quiet." "Oh, Wash, do be a dear, good brother. There's nothing to worry about. Papa and Mama don't know anything about what happened in London, so they won't be alarmed." If it were not for Lady Eleanor, I might have found this conversation mystifying, but thanks to her, I could grasp it. Even Oscar was privy to the incident mentioned in their discussion and reported it in his account. Miss Virginia, he said, had once raced old Lord Bilton on her pony twice round the park, winning by a length and a half just in front of the Achilles statue, to the huge delight of the young Duke of Cheshire, who proposed to her on the spot, and was sent back to Eton that very night by his guardians in floods of tears. The way Lady Eleanor learned about the episode was from Miss Virginia herself. Since coming to Canterville Chase, the girl had quickly grown fond of Mrs. Umney, and had made her a confidant in many matters. "I'll patch things up for you with Sheila. You see if I don't," promised Virginia. And of course in the end she bent poor Wash to her will, which one was rapidly coming to see was a will of iron. Miss Virginia Otis would, I decided then and there, bear watching. Perhaps you are expecting to hear that the very next night I mounted a new campaign, as some headstrong novice might have done. No, a thing one learns as a ghost is that there is plenty of time. For that matter, perhaps the sensible course would have been to simply retire to the tapestry chamber and wait them out. I could have won that game hands down, but that would have been too easy. Such was not my temperament. As the 4th Lord Canterville, 1546 to 1584, I had always been a man of action, and ever since then I had been a ghost of action. Long before the Otis's arrival, I had had enough of sitting around in an empty house thumbing through old issues of Cornhill magazine, or rereading the poetry of Mrs. Hemans while the family was away. A monotonous existence had left me thoroughly discontented. I was spoiling for action. But at the same time, there was no point in allowing myself to be precipitated into hasty and ill-conceived counteroffenses. One should meditate, organize, and then strike. For the rest of the week, then, the Otises were undisturbed. The only thing that excited any attention was the continual renewal of the bloodstain on the library floor, and that principally because of the spectacular mutations of the colors. Some mornings it was found to be a dull red, on others vermilion or rich purple, and on one occasion a bright emerald green. Being the sort of people they were, the Otises took all this as a form of amusement, and even made bets each evening as to what color would show up the next morning. Only Miss Virginia had the good taste to look distressed at the sight, and even seemed on the point of tears the morning it was emerald green. I must confess it became harder and harder to put her in the same category with the rest of the family. What the effort cost me to maintain the blood stain, I shall not even go into. For me it had become almost a patriotic gesture, like keeping the flag flying. There will always be in England, and an English blood stain, that sort of thing. Each morning that young fanatic Wash went down on his hands and knees to attack the stain with his vicious Paragon detergent, and each morning I stood invisibly by, tantalized by his position, longing to kick him in the pants. One morning I actually did, but being thinned out to invisibility, my foot did not register on his behind. Each time he rose to his feet, having eradicated yet another blood stain, his gushing remarks about the Paragon detergent resembled those to be heard on your telly concerning your present-day detergents. If Washington Otis were with us now, he would probably be seen standing between two credulous housewives, saying, "Now, ladies, which do you think is Pinkerton's and which is Brand X?" He had just gone down on his knees one morning to begin his daily desecration, alone in the library except for myself, when Sheila entered, right-centered, to retrieve a polishing cloth she had left on the mantelpiece. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir," she said, and Wash turned redder than the original stain and scrambled to his feet. "It's all right, Sheila. I wish I could do that for you, sir, since I am charged with keeping this room in order. Mrs. Umney provides some very good scouring powder." "Oh, I wouldn't think of asking you to her. I'm only too glad to... Besides, I don't believe you would find an ordinary scouring powder as effective as Pinkerton's detergent," he said, holding up his favorite weapon and drawing courage from it. "Very well, sir." They stood looking at each other for the 5 awkward seconds it took Wash to bring himself to further speech. He cleared his throat in a manner that suggested a golf ball had somehow become lodged in it. Sheila, I wanted to apologize for my boorish actions the other morning." A curious sparkle illumined her bright brown eyes for an instant, before the lovely long lashes lowered to hide them briefly from his dazzled view. "That's quite all right, sir. It was gentlemanly of you not to attempt some mean revenge on me, and to keep the matter private between us." "Well, not exactly private," said Wash, dropping his voice. "My sister caught on, and she's using her knowledge to blackmail me." "Blackmail?" Sheila's eyes widened in a startled glance. "She doesn't seem that kind at all. How?" "She agreed not to say anything about it to anybody if I'd ask Mother to invite the Duke of Cheshire down for a visit." "You mean the young gentleman who proposed to her when she—" "You know about it." "Mrs. Umney told me in strictest confidence, of course." "Well, I'll be switched," said Wash, pleased at finding himself on similarly confidential terms with Sheila. "It's humiliating to think that a young woman such as your sister would have to resort to such subterfuges in order to accomplish a perfectly innocent end," said Sheila indignantly. "Well, I don't know how innocent," said Wash. "I think she's smitten with him." "Nevertheless." "At any rate, I asked Mother, and she invited him, and he's coming." "I see," said Sheila, her mind still obviously preoccupied with brooding on injustice. "Mr. Otis, have you read the works of your countrywoman, Miss Amelia Bloomer?" Now here was a name that all red-blooded American males of that day greeted with hoots and derisive laughter. But such was Wash's infatuation that he actually kept his face straight and looked at her with earnest attention. "Well, no, I can't say that I have," he admitted. "You should, sir. She's a wonderful woman. In fact, you have many outstanding figures in women's rights movements in America, Mrs. Bloomer, Mrs. Susan B. Anthony, and others. Mrs. Bloomer's writings first appeared in her magazine, The Lily. I'm only sorry the Lily ceased publication before I was born." "It's a shame," agreed Wash. He was ready, of course, to agree with anything. "I have some of her tracts with me, if you would care to read them, sir." "Oh, I would. I'll meet you again here tomorrow right after breakfast, and you can give them to me." "Thank you, sir. And now if you would like to get back to that bloodstain, sir, I won't bother you. I must return to the servants' hall." She glanced down at the stain. "Isn't it strange the way it changes color? It must have something to do with that detergent you use." "I'm sure that's it," agreed Wash. Taking her polishing cloth from the mantelpiece, Sheila dropped him a curtsy and gave him a smile that left him staggering blissfully and withdrew. I won't deny that I watched the whole of this scene with malicious enjoyment, anticipating the paternal ire that would be aroused once Minister Otis learned that his son had become involved with a parlor maid. The fact that the minister was a Democrat did not mean he was a Democratic. And furthermore, he was a devout descendant of his Puritan ancestors. I left Wash standing there in his trance and turned my attention to more serious matters. That was a dreadful week. To be honest, I was suffering from ghost gripe. You've heard of writer's block, that condition of mind in which a writer can't think of anything to write about. Well, my condition was just the opposite. I could think of too many possibilities in my line. I mooned around, and the first thing I knew, it was Sunday night and another week down the drain. Early that evening, Lady Eleanor dropped by. She had more free time now, since after that first dinner, Mrs. Otis had hastily hired a cook and paid the woman extra to come immediately to the rescue. Obviously intending only a brief visit, Lady Eleanor had not bothered to change from her aged housekeeper disguise. "I bid you welcome to the Tapestry Chamber, good wife Umney," I said, mimicking that antique fodderl with which she had creakily greeted the Otises on the day of their arrival. "I'm glad you dropped by. I'm having a lot of trouble choosing the role in which to make my comeback. How about Martin of the Marsh or the Mangled Minstrel? I doubt this bunch have any ear for music. Queasy Quentin or the Disemboweled Corpse? Wash would probably whip out a medical book and start talking about the evils of unsuccessful surgery. Griswold the Gory. Stop reminding me of blood. It hasn't a marked success around here. Well, at any rate, I wish you'd get cracking again, and soon. Don't rush me. There is plenty of time." "Not for me, there isn't. I need some quick relief. Cook's been took with a fever, as she puts it, and I've had to put the apron on again." "Oh, that's it, is it? Well, in that case, I can rest on my oars. You should be able to whip up something that will clear Canterville Chase of the Otises in a twinkling." "No, that wouldn't be fair. You have to play by the rules, and this is your show. You're supposed to do this job." "You mean I can't even lend a helping hand now and then?" "Oh, a change of weather, thunder and lightning is needed, that sort of thing. But otherwise, no." The burdens of state sat heavily on my shoulders, but after a moment I squared those shoulders, and my face took on the same British bulldog look that would stand Sir Winston Churchill in good stead when he copied it over half a century later. "We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender," I growled, eerily foreshadowing the very words he would utter himself on a subsequent occasion. And for both of us, at the time we spoke those words, the worst was still ahead.